So we are covering today, we're approaching the end of the 20th century today, uh, and I supposed to start with 1991, but I would like to rewind back a little bit and to start with the Millennium of Russian Christianity celebrated in 1988. So this date was uh, a very important jubilee, very important celebration for the Russian Church, because the state uh, permitted to the Church celebrate openly, solemnly 1,000 years of Russian Christianity. If you think just about 50 years ago, right, that it would be unthinkable. So you remember the movie Alexander Nevsky, right, that was shot in 1942, and Alexander Nevsky, he comes out, actually this is a movie about the Soviet time, but not Alexander Nevsky, because a person like Alexander Nevsky, uh, who would probably cross himself even before have a drink of water, he never crosses himself. So kind of, he really totally, he comes across like a secular man. Like, I mean, it gives you, and coming from this perspective, that was a huge leap forward. And Russian bishops, they try to mend, to sort of fix relationship with the Russian church abroad, because they felt, actually, remember also what we talked about canon law, right? That you first of all have to find out about the time when a particular council adopted particular canons. So the same trick is here. We need to see what was outside of the window, and it was perestroika. So it was big time when things started to open up, right? So that's actually when I came in Jordanville for the first time, 1988, which was totally unthinkable before. Um, and in this time, right, they tried to build bridges with Russian Church abroad and invited representatives of the Russian Church abroad come to those celebrations, right? But Russian Church abroad was bewildered. I mean, when I say Russian Church abroad, it would be a very good question from you. But what do you mean? I mean, what do you mean? It's really very vague, very unspecific. So, and that's what a historian would ask. Always ask to unpack your terminology. What do you mean by this? So, do you mean this? Are we on the same page, or we are not on the same page? So, I mean, when I say Russian Church abroad, I mean Bishop Council of the Russian Church abroad. That's sort of a solid criteria to that can represent the church. And our bishops, they were bewildered because they already had their own bishop in Russia, which was secretly consecrated in 1982. So how would it work out if they send a representative? At the same time, they also were impressed by comparison, by the contrast with what they saw in 1988 with widespread celebrations of Russian Christianity in Kiev and Moscow, I believe. St. Petersburg, there was, I think, a conference, impressive theological conference. And with what they saw just before, I mean, in just 20 years before, maybe. So they try to express this idea in the epistle, Millennium epistle, mentioning pious Russian people and pious clergy and so on, because there also were clergymen, the Russian Church abroad, who wanted to have relationship with the Church of Russia. But at the same time, the previous history, confrontations, exchanges of epistles, exchanges of open letters, right? So reception through the repentance. At the same time, clergymen from the Church of Russia would be received into the Russian Church abroad through repentance, and vice versa. So kind of on one hand, you have this Cold War confrontation. On the other hand, you kind of recognize particular science, you kind of particular language of the time. You see all those common culture, common liturgical culture there in Russia, so sort of common expressions of piety, and basically common cultural markers like, I mean, monasteries started to open like in 1988, I think towards the end of the year. There was a big deal that Optina Hermitage was passed to the church. It was huge point of inspiration. And monks in Jordanville, they worked on collecting materials for glorification of the Optina elders. And in 2-year times, Optina elders were canonized at the council in Montreal in 1990. Yes, they were canonized. Again, sort of Russian Church abroad at this point already felt totally comfortable with canonizing Russian saints. I believe was the same year, 2 years time, around the same time, they were also canonized in Russia. So, but again, both churches continue in parallel modes. And in this parallel existence, especially from the Russian Church abroad idea, there were voices that actually we are the Russian Church. And this was a temptation that started in the Russian diaspora from the very beginning. Kind of understandably that those who left in Russia under the oppressive regime, under the Soviet regime, they could not speak freely, and they were treated sometimes with in patronizing way. When in 1922, Patriarch Tikhon disbanded the Supreme Church Authority abroad, there was discussion at the Council of the Russian Church abroad in Serbia. And a secretary of the council, Evkustodion Maharablidze, who was from military department of the Russian Church, he said actually that Patriarch Tikhon, he could be brought up to the trial because by his act, he acted against conciliarity, against subordinacy. So, and idea that Metropolitan Anthony Khrapovitsky should in fact become a locum tenens because they felt we are free here and they are not free in Russia. Therefore, we should really offer ourselves as like second driver role and so on. But this was a problem because by doing this, you are not self-critical. And thanks God, there were voices like His Beatitude of Blessed Memory, Metropolitan Anastasi, who is with us, in Jordanville, and he's an amazing hierarch. Amazing. I'm glad to be a member of the church which was led by him. He, before the revolution, was an archbishop of the Russian province of Bessarabia, right? And his title was of Kishinev and Khotin. Even before the revolution, before the council, 1917, 1918, he permitted liturgical to conduct services in Romanian, right? And then also he wanted to have representative participation in diocesan or diocesan administration. He wanted that positions would be filled by Moldavians. He was a Russian imperial hierarch sent by emperor's decree from St. Petersburg and he was so sensitive, right? Then when Moldavian Republic was founded in 1917, and Romanians entered in Moldavia, and there was huge movement to reunite with the Romanians, and this province was under the Russian authority since 1809, when the Russians took it from the Ottomans. So, and he identified himself as a Romanian patriot. But then Romanians, because in Romania there was, like in Russia and Byzantium, again, no separation between the church and state. So the state acted, and right, and sent Romanian church to Chisinau, and they offered Archbishop Anastasia to become a member of the Romanian Synod. So, and he declined it because he said, I couldn't do it without consultation with my church. And the same, at that time, he was elected a member of the Synod of the Russian Church. So he really, like, it's not like, I mean, oh, we have our fathers and Metropolitan Anastasia is one of them, and that's why we really sort of talk a lot about him. No, I talk a lot about him because by all standards, he's an outstanding man. Regardless, my church, your church, but I mean, for the Russian Church. And he was elected a member of the Synod of the entire Russian Church. And he was the one who designed the rite of Patriarch Tikhon installment, because he was a liturgiologist. So he went to Moscow, and when he wanted to come back to his diocese, with which he was, how to say, uh, married, right, in a sense, Vinchalsa, right? So like a priest is married to his parish, and he was married to his diocese. The Romanians didn't let him into the country. So he settled in Odessa, but he used his title, I think, before in 1950, he moved to New York. If I'm not mistaken, until 1950, his title was of Chisinau and Khotin. And there is a letter of 1925 where he still recognized himself as a bishop of this area. So when he came to this event in 1922, when there were some sort of, how to say, not very wise speeches like Makarablidze, he actually he changed the mind. He really said that we should be very careful and should be obedient to patriarch, right? So, and also he showed very high level of insight, but the problem, I think, was that he didn't have a team. That's, I think, was his tragedy. He didn't have a team. Uh, so there's, thanks God, for people like him who were very sober, but sort of this triumphalistic approach was from the very beginning a temptation in the Russian diaspora, the Russian church abroad, that we know better than those in Russia because we are in the free world and so on. Yes, sure, that's right, but at the same time, there was very clear sign of not sensing nuances. And this sort of attitude somehow transformed until nowadays, when you come across this reaction. Why do we need to go to Russia, like to event of the Russian church? I mean, we live in the West. What can we learn there? And this is very myopic because look at the interconsular presence of the Russian church, the think tank where documents drafted and so on. Even just to be at this workshop, as at a workshop, is very educating, to see basically the level of openness, to see that in some senses there is a lot to learn. And it would be like with everything else. It's sort of like inferior and superior cultures. So why do I go to Vietnam? I mean, what can I learn from Vietnam, right? It doesn't sound right. So does this. I mean, the whole attitude. I mean, you learn from anyone, and you don't feel that you are superior, right?
Mhm, mhm.
So I think it's much more mild and not really confrontational as it was, but sort of like it's just I think it's at this point that we are we kind of don't consider opportunities that we may use to our advantage. That's I think basically. Uh, but before that somehow, and it's still also probably now somehow with us, we kind of felt that okay, we are ahead of the time. Like I mean, Jordanville has registration. Jordanville has had registration, has been registered from years, to go, and they only do it in Russia. That's what you can basically hear, line you can hear sometimes. Right, true. Yes, there is things to learn that they can learn from us as well, but doesn't preclude us from being open and from constantly exchange ideas and try to be open, stay open. So, but it was much more pressing problem back then. And this triumphalistic attitude came to the surface around 1990, around 1988, 1990, when Russian Church Abroad decided to accept parishes in Russia, while the same year it was admitted that we don't know the situation in Russia. We don't know actually. We don't understand exactly people from there. But then suddenly an archimandrite came from Suzdal with his parish. I mean, he petitioned Russian Church Abroad to be received in the Russian Church Abroad, so he was received with his parish without getting canonical releases, of course, and so on. And then in 1990, at that council in Montreal, there was decision about founding Free Russian Church. Sort of, it was called Free Russian Church. And again, people didn't think about terminologies. That I mean, now we have also Free Russian Church. So how is going to be? But it was probably done for the sake of registration, for registering, because next year in yes, Brat Ivan Grisnov, please. Yes, Brat Ivan.
Yes, if you could briefly explain why the Archbishop of Suzdal decided to enter the Russian Church abroad.
Right, right. It was an Archimandrite Valentin. He had to be transferred. He had a clash of personalities with his new bishop. He has been in Suzdal for years. He was like it was like a local important man there, and he suddenly, after so many years there, he had to be transferred elsewhere, and he had this clash of personalities with the bishop, with the local bishop. So, and he started to knock on different doors, right? And I believe that he brought up issues of Sergianism, maybe, and ecumenism, I think, in order to be received in the Russian church abroad. That's, I think, how it was done. Yeah. So,
Thank you.
and, mhm. So, and Russian Church abroad started to have parishes. Our bishops, Bishop Ilarion and Archbishop Mark, in 1991, they went to Suzdal and celebrated. So, and I was a server at the service also there. And what started there, that um, again, there was not understanding that Russian people would not going to leave their churches and masses and join, right? So enjoying those parishes. And also, a question of competition or conflicts between our people there in Russia, between Bishop Valentin, who became next year a bishop, and Bishop Lazarus, who was consecrated in 1992. And then Russian Church Abroad sent its own representative, Bishop Varnava from France, and Bishop Barnava started to be associated with right wings, ultra-nationalist movements. The kind of Russian Church Abroad started to minister to them. And then our bishops, Father Victor Potapov and Bishop Ilarion, they had to give a press conference explaining that Russian Church Abroad is not anti-Semitic church. So because of the kind of rhetoric that those nationalist groups employed. But all this experience in Russia was accumulation of experience, accumulation of accommodation. I don't know what is it, accommodation, Brother Seraphim, what word to use. So it was Russian Church Abroad started to acquire experience in Russia, and that was a positive thing. And as a result of its own experience in with parishes, the Russian Church Abroad, people who were active there, like Archbishop Mark, who were actively involved, they started to have doubts about success of our parishes there, and not just success, but also they started to see that the Moscow Patriarchate is the Russian Church. So, and I would say, I would put it in this way: so we don't have other church, we don't have other Russia. So I don't have other church for you, okay? So this is the Russian Church. To say that this the whole Russian Church is a Sergionist schism, right? So as I used to say or think, so that's a huge stretch, because you cannot really see in those different groups, right, that claim to represent authentic Russian Church. I mean, you don't see substantial reasons for them to maintain the separation, and sort of, can they be the whole what has been left of the historical Russian Church, right? So, and to recognize in them that the Russian Church, that's all what has left from the Russian Church, is problematic. To see that Christ's will is that all people would go and join those small groups, because if people would remain in the Russian Church, like mainstream Moscow Patriarchate, they would not save their souls, or basically they might say, if you know the truth, then you have to do it. So there may be different approaches to this, yes. But nevertheless, we see that those problems that with Metropolitan Sergius attitude toward conciliarity, that basically the church came out of his synod, and those things, they were problematic, but the level of those problems did not really turn Russian Church Abroad in a church in Russia in a heresy, or in something that became intrinsically different from the Orthodox Church. Okay, so I would like to